Welcome to today's presentation on the benefits of woodworking for seniors. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're grabbing our tools, so to speak, and doing a deep dive into something really quite fascinating. The many benefits of woodworking, especially as we get older.
That's right, and we've got quite a range of sources to look at: articles, guides, and even a specific scientific study that looks closely at hand skills and brain function.
Our goal here is really to unpack what these sources are telling us. They paint woodworking as, well, much more than just a hobby.
Definitely. It's shown as an activity with real psychological, physical, and social upsides.
And we want to especially focus on what the material says about cognitive function and just overall well-being, particularly for older adults.
Yeah, the sources don't just list points. They really describe woodworking as something that engages the whole person, mind, and body.
Absolutely. It sounds like it's not just about building, say, a birdhouse, but about building mental sharpness, maybe reducing stress, and even finding connection.
Exactly. We'll be looking at how it keeps the brain busy, how it can calm the mind, get you moving physically, and even build community.
Okay, let's start with the brain then. Because one source that really stood out was that research study focusing specifically on manual dexterity training.
Right. This one looked at older adults aged between 65 and 88.
And manual dexterity, that's basically skilled hand movements, right? Stuff we need every day.
Precisely. And it's something that, yes, can often decline a bit with age. But the key question this study asked was, can we train it? And does that training affect our thinking skills?
So decline isn't necessarily a given.
That's what they were investigating. The idea that these skills can be trained, maybe even improved, and that this could have knock-on effects for cognition.
How did they test that? What did the training involve?
Well, they used a digital peg test device. It involved tasks needing pretty complex hand movements, but also things like planning and following visual sequences.
So more than just simple exercises, almost like a puzzle using your hands.
Kind of, yeah. Intricate, timed tasks that required both dexterity and that executive function, the planning, the sequencing.
And the results? What happened after the training period?
After 12 weeks, the group that did this specific training showed, well, significant improvements, not just on the hand tests they practiced, but also on tests measuring executive functioning. That was the really interesting part.
Executive functioning?
Yeah.
That's like the brain CEO.
Yeah.
Attention, problem solving, stopping yourself from getting distracted.
Exactly. They saw measurable improvements in things related to attention and focus, particularly handling distractions, something often tested with the Stroop effect, and also better performance in fine motor assembly tasks.
Okay, so how does this link directly back to woodworking?
Well, the researchers had a hypothesis. They suggested this kind of hands-on, complex dexterity work stimulates the prefrontal cortex.
Which is key for those higher-level thinking skills.
Right. Now think about woodworking. It's packed with demands on manual dexterity, precise cuts, fitting joints, sanding.
Holding tools steady, making tiny adjustments.
Exactly, and it absolutely requires those executive functions. Planning the project steps, figuring out the sequence, solving problems when things don't fit, visualizing the final piece. That's spatial reasoning.
So woodworking is basically doing exactly the kind of complex mental and manual work the study found beneficial.
It seems to align very closely, and other sources we looked at back this up. They talk about how woodworking forces your brain to plan, predict, use special skills.
That Sparrow source mentioned spatial skills specifically, didn't it?
It did. It highlighted how woodworking enhances spatial thinking, which is crucial for everyday things like organizing your stuff or even planning your schedule. They referenced a 2014 study linking carpentry to better spatial reasoning.
And didn't that source also talk about activating the whole brain?
Yes, that's a really important point. Woodworking isn't just one skill. It pulls in creativity for the design, math for measuring, logic for the structure.
Memory for techniques you've learned. The spatial reasoning, again, emotions may be in the design, and constant hand-eye coordination.
Precisely. It engages so many brain areas at once. This strengthens the connections, the neural pathways, keeping the whole system active and communicating. That's potentially very powerful for cognitive health as we age.
Okay, so a strong case for keeping the mind sharp. What about feelings, mood, stress, the psychological side?
This came up a lot in the sources. The intense focus woodworking demands seems to be a major stress reliever.
How so?
Well, when you're really concentrating on getting a measurement just right or sanding a piece perfectly smooth, your mind doesn't have much room left for worries or anxieties.
It forces you into the present moment, like mindfulness.
Exactly like mindfulness. That deep attention fosters a calm state, quieting that internal chatter. Several sources explicitly linked this kind of focus to lower stress and anxiety levels.
And it's creative too, which must help.
Absolutely. It's a very tangible form of self-expression. You take raw wood and make something uniquely yours. You plan, design, solve problems. Sources suggest creative outlets like this build emotional resilience and really boost self-esteem.
Finishing a project must feel pretty good.
Oh, definitely. There's a real solid sense of accomplishment. Seeing something you envisioned and built with your own hands, whether it's simple or complex,
That must build confidence.
hugely. It encourages you to tackle the next challenge, building resilience. One source pointed out that even achieving small, concrete goals like finishing a step can increase happiness and reduce stress.
I imagine it also teaches patience. You can't really rush woodworking.
That's a great point. Waiting for glue to dry, carefully sanding it, cultivates patience and perseverance. And those skills are useful everywhere in life. The Sparrow source also mentioned something about normalizing brain chemistry.
Oh, how does that work?
The idea is that engaging in enjoyable, rewarding activities like woodworking can help your brain release and process neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin more effectively. These are key for mood regulation.
So the pleasure of the activity itself has a positive chemical effect.
That's the principle. Engaging in things you find genuinely rewarding supports better mental well-being on a biological level.
Mind sharp, mood boosted. What about the physical aspect? Is woodworking physically demanding?
It might surprise you, but yes, the sources make it clear it's not just sitting around. There's definitely a physical component.
Like what kinds of movements?
Well, you might be lifting and moving lumber. Sawing, whether by hand or machine, uses arm and shoulder muscles. Sanding takes effort. Assembling pieces often requires strength and dexterity.
So it contributes to general fitness, maybe upper body strength.
It certainly can, especially for hands, arms, and the upper body. But maybe even more importantly, it's fantastic for hand-eye coordination and fine motor skills.
And those fine motor skills are so important for daily life, things that can get harder with age.
Exactly. Things like buttoning clothes, writing, handling utensils. The precise movements you practice constantly in woodworking directly support those everyday essential skills.
That makes a lot of sense.
And don't forget the sensory side. The smell of the wood, the feel of the grain, the sound of the tools. It's a very rich sensory experience, which adds another layer of engagement and reward.
And even just learning to use tools safely requires a certain physical awareness, right?
That's a very good point. Following safety rules means being mindful of your body and movements, which can translate to being more careful and aware in other physical tasks too.
Okay, one more area. The social side. Woodworking often seems like something you do alone in a shed. Is that always the case?
Not at all. According to our sources, it can actually be a really effective way to connect with people.
How so?
Well, think about joining a woodworking class, or a local club, or maybe a community maker space. You're instantly surrounded by people with a shared interest.
Right, shared spaces often mean shared tools, maybe helping each other out.
Exactly. It can foster a sense of community, even teamwork. And the activity itself provides easy conversation starters.
Like, what are you making? Or what kind of wood is that?
Precisely. It makes socializing easier, especially maybe for people who find small talk difficult. The shared task provides a natural focus for interaction.
And building friendships around a shared passion is a known way to combat loneliness.
Absolutely. Our sources consistently highlight the importance of social connections for mental health. Reducing isolation, building a support network, woodworking communities can provide that.
It feels like woodworking ties into a bigger picture about crafts and well-being generally.
It does. We looked at a systematic review that's a study that gathers findings from lots of other studies on crafts-based interventions for mental health.
And woodworking was included in that.
Yes, it was one of the crafts examined, alongside things like pottery, textiles, etc. The review looked at how these activities are used therapeutically for various groups, including older adults.
What was the overall conclusion?
The review found there is some evidence suggesting craft activities can benefit mental health. They noted short-term improvements in things like anxiety, stress levels, mood, and life satisfaction.
So promising, but maybe more research needed.
Exactly. The review called for more high-quality, long-term studies. But it does support the general idea that engaging in crafts, which would include woodworking, can contribute positively to well-being.
And it mentioned findings related to specific groups.
Yeah, for example, it noted pottery being used effectively with nursing home residents and even people with Parkinson's. So the potential therapeutic value of craft seems quite broad. Woodworking fits well within that framework.
Okay, so let's try to pull all these threads together for you, our listener. What's the big takeaway from this deep dive?
Well, based on these sources, woodworking really seems to offer older adults a powerful, multifaceted way to enrich their lives.
It's hitting several key areas at once.
Right. It's a way to potentially sharpen cognitive skills, manage stress effectively, express creativity tangibly, maintain physical dexterity and strength, and build valuable social bonds.
It sounds like a genuinely rewarding activity that goes way beyond just making things.
It does. It seems to offer a real sense of purpose, accomplishment, and contributes positively to overall well-being in later life.
Before we wrap up, any final thought to leave our listeners with?
Just perhaps this. Consider how the very process of taking raw wood, something natural and maybe imperfect, and carefully shaping it into something useful or beautiful. Well, maybe that process itself is a kind of metaphor, a metaphor for how we can actively shape our own resilience and well-being as we navigate the changes and challenges of getting older.
If you have any thoughts from this presentation, please leave a comment below in the description where you will also find additional information on today's topic. And please consider subscribing to our channel so you can be notified of future videos. We thank you for watching.